In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the misconceptions about design. These are some of the most common ones I've heard people say, and I've even had some of these myself. So the first one is that design is only about aesthetics. So design as a concept is quite a broad field, and it's actually about how something works, about how people interact with it. It can be about branding and communication. So design as a concept is quite a broad thing that reaches well beyond just surface level beauty. It includes problem solving, functionality, user friendliness, creating a meaningful experience for users. Aesthetics will be a big part of this, and a big part of how design is used to communicate meaning, but it's only one part. The second one is that anyone can be a designer. Well, I mean, I think to some extent anyone can be a designer because anyone can learn the skills, but it's more than just skills. It's more than just knowing how to use Photoshop and Illustrator and Figma and all of the other apps that are used nowadays. But creativity and passion are just one part of the equation. There's a lot of knowledge and skills that go into it, a lot of experience. You can only learn certain things through experience. I would also say that being a good designer requires some knowledge of other related fields. So, for example, if you're going to be a logo designer, you should understand print. You should also understand websites. If you're going to build a website, you should understand to some extent the functionality and development and coding side of the website, since the design and the coding have to go hand in hand. This could also mean communicating really closely with the developers, but to some extent you should also have a baseline understanding. The next point, design is all subjective. So this kind of goes back to aesthetics again, isn't it? So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's to some extent it's true. There is some certainly subjective quality to design, and there are trends that will come and go as well. But there are certain principles which are rooted in usability and psychology that are extremely important to design. So I mean, things as simple as contrast. If there's not enough contrast, you will not physically be able to read whatever it is that you're designing. Users will not be able to read it. So there is certainly an objective element to design that is really important. You also are likely to have a lot of research and decision making and problem solving going into design, creating the right solution for the right business, for the right outcomes. So again, that's kind of subjective, but it's also more about delivering what is right for the objectives and for that particular business or that particular application. Designers work alone. So this is sometimes true, sometimes not so true. Some designers will kind of work independently, but they're still going to be communicating with the client. They might be communicating with other people, other stakeholders. It might be a web development team or a web developer they need to speak to, copywriters. So there's always someone else. And of course, you also have design teams or design agencies. So designers don't always work alone. Design is expensive and time consuming. So this can be true. Like the other misconceptions, there is an element of truth. It can be very expensive. If you work with a local company, a small company, or a freelancer or an agency, you're likely to get value back from the logo or the design that is vastly more than what you've actually paid. So I would argue that it's closer to the opposite. Design is very inexpensive. At the very top end, if you're like a huge corporation, then design can be very expensive. So in conclusion, what I want you to take away from this video is that design is much more than just how something looks. Design is about what you're communicating. It's about how something works. It's about how people interact with that thing, whether it's a website, an application, a logo, a brand, an identity. So design is much bigger than that. And by understanding it a little bit better, I hope that we can all appreciate the big difference that design makes in our lives.